Fudo thought he was going to help destroy Hidden Leaf Village, but instead, he got one of the most claustrophobic deaths imaginable. This guy led an entire army of reanimated ninja, and Yamato shut him down with a single technique that turned into pure nightmare fuel. Wood release. Tree bind. Flourishing. Burial doesn't just trap you. The wooden branches wrap around your entire body and then keep growing. Imagine feeling those thick tendrils tighten around your chest while you're sinking into the ground. Every breath becomes harder as your ribs start cracking under the pressure. But here's the worst part. The wood doesn't stop growing. It continues expanding inside your body, ripping through organs and snapping bones from the inside out. Fudo felt every single branch tear through his flesh while being buried alive, completely conscious and unable to move. The psychological horror is just as bad. You're trapped underground, feeling your skeleton get crushed piece by piece, knowing there's absolutely no escape. Fudo's mission failed spectacularly, and his death was slow, methodical torture. But being crushed alive is nothing compared to multiple blades piercing you from every direction. These twin brothers had one of the most terrifying abilities in the series. They could fuse their bodies together or with their enemies, which should have made them nearly unstoppable. Instead, it became the reason they died in absolute agony. Kankuro trapped them inside his puppet Kurowari, and there was zero chance of escape. The brothers were completely sealed inside this hollow wooden body, probably thinking they could break out or use their fusion technique to survive. Then, Kankuro activated his black secret technique, Machine One-Shot. Multiple hidden blades shot out from every direction simultaneously, piercing their bodies from angles they couldn't even see coming. We're talking about dozens of sharp metal spikes stabbing through flesh and bone at the exact same time. Here's what made it worse. Their shared consciousness meant they felt each other's pain. Every blade that hit Sakon, Ukon experienced too. Every puncture wound was doubled in their minds. Their regeneration ability, which normally saved them, just made the torture last longer. The screams echoing from inside that puppet were haunting. Blood started leaking out of the cracks, and you knew both brothers were getting shredded alive in complete darkness with no way to fight back. But being shredded alive is nothing compared to the absolute, suffocating terror of having your entire skeleton compressed into dust. Before we continue, let's break down exactly why Gaara's technique is so perfectly designed for maximum suffering. Sand-binding coffin isn't just about crushing force, it's about precision torture. The sand applies pressure gradually from all directions simultaneously, ensuring victims feel every bone break in sequence while remaining fully conscious. The technique literally turns your skeleton into powder while keeping you alive to experience it. During the Chunin exams, Gaara was basically a walking nightmare who saw killing as the most natural thing in the world. Team Shigure made the fatal mistake of thinking they could take his scroll and walk away alive. Gaara's sand-binding coffin doesn't kill you instantly. First, it wraps around your entire body and locks you in place so you can't move a single muscle. You're completely helpless, suspended in midair, knowing exactly what's coming next. Then the real horror begins. The sand starts compressing slowly. You feel every bone in your body getting crushed one by one. Your ribs crack and splinter, puncturing your lungs. Your organs get squeezed until they burst inside you. The pressure builds gradually, so you experience every second of your skeleton being ground into powder. Team Shigure's leader begged for mercy and even offered their scroll, hoping Gaara would show some humanity. But Gaara killed him anyway, then used the exact same technique on his teammates who were already surrendering. The blood explosion from the sand coffin was grotesque. When all that compressed flesh and bone finally gave way, it erupted in a crimson spray that Gaara casually blocked with an umbrella. He called it quick and painless, but that was just his complete desensitization to violence talking. For Team Shigure, it was pure agony both physically and mentally. They felt their bodies being crushed to paste while knowing their deaths meant absolutely nothing to this monster. Physical crushing is immediate, but what happens when the pain is focused not on your body but on your very essence? Yamanaka got dealt one of the worst hands in the entire series. She wasn't killed in battle or executed for crimes. She was used as a living sacrifice for Edo Tensei, which is basically having your entire existence erased so someone else can use your body. Obito needed to demonstrate Kabuto's perfected resurrection technique, and Fu was just unlucky enough to be there. The process doesn't just kill you, it tears your soul out of your living body while you're fully conscious and aware of what's happening. Imagine feeling your very essence getting ripped apart from the inside. Your memories, your personality, everything that makes you who you are gets shredded like paper. But you're still conscious through all of it, experiencing every moment of your spiritual destruction. The worst part is that your soul doesn't get to rest. It gets trapped in eternal torment, bound to serve as the anchor for someone else's reincarnated body. Fu's soul was literally consumed to bring back Tarun, meaning her suffering continues forever inside his undead form. She stood there completely helpless, unable to fight back or escape, while Obito's jutsu physically tore her apart and reconstructed her into someone else. Her final screams weren't just from physical pain. They were from the horror of complete erasure. This death enabled the Fourth Great Ninja War's worst atrocities. Fu didn't just die. She became fuel for the very technique that would terrorize the entire ninja world. The spiritual torture of Fu's end enabled a war. This next death was the war, a senseless, spurting rampage fueled by a broken heart. Obito's complete mental breakdown after witnessing Rin's death created one of the most horrific massacres in the entire series. This wasn't strategic killing or even revenge. This was pure, uncontrolled rage turned into a blood-soaked nightmare. The moment Obito saw Kakashi's Chidori pierce through Rin's chest, something inside him shattered completely. His Mangekyo Sharingan awakened instantly, and with it came a level of violence that nobody was prepared for. The Kirigakure Ninja who had orchestrated Rin's death were about to experience what happens when grief transforms into unstoppable fury. Giant wooden spikes erupted from Obito's right side, skewering multiple victims simultaneously. But these weren't clean kills. The branches grew rapidly inside their bodies, ripping through flesh and bone from within like living spears. Imagine feeling thick wooden tendrils bursting through your organs, tearing apart your insides while you're still conscious. One unlucky ninja tried to grab Rin's body, thinking he could use her as leverage. Obito caught him mid-reach, slammed his head into the ground, and then proceeded to pound his skull into oblivion with his bare fist. The wet, crushing sounds of bone and brain matter being pulverized echoed across the battlefield. The remaining Kirigakure shinobi watched in absolute terror as their comrades got crushed between massive wooden branches. These weren't quick deaths. The wood grew slowly enough that victims felt every splinter pierce their skin, every branch break their ribs, every root wrap around their throats. What made this massacre even more disturbing was the irony. Wood release was originally Hashirama's technique, meant for protection and building. Obito turned it into an instrument of mass murder, turning something that should create life into a tool for brutal execution. The battlefield became a forest of death, with broken bodies impaled on wooden spikes and blood soaking into the earth. Obito stood there, surrounded by the carnage, his grief having created the masked man who would eventually terrorize the entire ninja world. The chaos of a massacre ends quickly, but what Shikamaru did to Hidan was a different kind of evil. It was perpetual, calculated torment. Quick question before we dive into infinite suffering. Is a public execution worse than being eaten alive? We've seen both on this list, and honestly, the psychological damage might be the real deciding factor. Drop your vote in the comments. I'm curious where you draw the line. Shikamaru's revenge for Asuma's murder was a masterpiece of psychological warfare that turned Hidan's greatest strength into his ultimate curse. This wasn't just about killing an enemy. This was about making him suffer forever. The brilliance of Shikamaru's plan started with pure deception. He tricked Hidan into drinking Kakuzu's blood instead of his own, which meant when Hidan performed his ritual and stabbed himself, he ended up destroying one of Kakuzu's hearts instead of killing Shikamaru. The look of confusion on Hidan's face when he realized he'd been played was priceless. But that was just the setup. Shikamaru had lured Hidan into Nara clan territory where the forest itself became a weapon. Explosive tags were hidden everywhere, connected by nearly invisible wires that Hidan couldn't see until it was too late. When those explosives detonated, they didn't just kill Hidan, they blew him into pieces while he remained fully conscious. His immortality meant he felt every single explosion tear through his body, every limb getting severed, every organ getting shredded, but he couldn't die from it. The real horror came next. Shikamaru revealed that the Nara clan would keep Hidan buried underground permanently. This wasn't a grave. This was an eternal prison. Hidan's severed head screamed threats and curses, but there was nothing he could do. Think about what immortality means in this context. Hidan will slowly starve and rot piece by piece, but he'll never actually die. He'll experience every moment of his body decaying, every sensation of his flesh falling away from his bones, every second of isolation and madness. He's trapped underground with no light, no sound, no human contact, just endless time to think about his failures while his body deteriorates around his consciousness. The psychological torture of complete isolation combined with physical decay creates suffering that will literally last forever. Shikamaru's cold calculation perfectly matched Hidan's cruelty. The man who took pleasure in causing pain now gets to experience it for eternity with no escape. Hidan's immortality became torture, but this next hero died protecting others. Kaiza was just a humble fisherman who became a hero by saving his village, but Gato turned his execution into one of the most psychologically devastating deaths in the series. This wasn't just murder. This was a calculated destruction of hope itself. The man who once promised to protect what mattered with these two arms had those very arms brutally amputated while he was fully conscious and helpless. Gato's thugs used crude axes to hack through bone and muscle at the shoulders, creating wounds that would cause massive hemorrhagic shock and nerve trauma. Imagine the searing agony of having your limbs severed while you're awake. Every nerve in those arms fired off pain signals in an intense barrage, creating burning, electric shocks that radiated from the stumps. The blood loss alone would have been overwhelming, arteries pumping life out of his body while he remained conscious enough to feel everything. But the physical torture was only half of Gato's plan. Kaiza was forced to face his execution in front of his adopted son Inari and the entire village. The man who had been their symbol of courage and protection was reduced to a broken, armless victim who couldn't even defend himself. The psychological impact on Inari was devastating. He had to watch his father figure, the person who taught him about courage and protecting others, get tortured and murdered while being completely powerless to help. That trauma shaped Inari's despair and his initial rejection of Naruto's optimism. For the village, Kaiza's death represented the complete destruction of their spirit. Their hero, the man who had literally saved them from natural disaster, was butchered like an animal to prove that resistance was futile. Gato didn't just kill one man, he murdered an entire community's hope. The symbolism was brutal and deliberate. The arms that once saved everyone from drowning were cut off, leaving him as helpless as the people he used to protect. His death became a warning that even heroes can be broken, and that standing up to evil only leads to suffering. Kaiza died as a hero, but this next death was pure maternal sacrifice. What you're about to see represents one of the most psychologically devastating moments in the entire series. This wasn't just random violence. This was the precise moment when grief transformed into the masked man who would terrorize the ninja world for decades. The night the Nine Tails attacked Hidden Leaf Village wasn't just a random disaster. It was Obito's calculated revenge that forced a mother to die by the claws of her own lifelong partner. Kushina's death created the cycle of pain that would define the entire series. Kushina had been Kurama's Jinchuriki since childhood, forming a bond with the beast that most hosts never achieve. She could actually communicate with the Nine Tails and had learned to work with its power instead of just containing it. That relationship made what happened next even more horrific. When Obito extracted Kurama from her body during childbirth, he didn't just steal her tailed beast, he weaponized it against her. Using his Sharingan to control the Nine Tails, Obito forced Kurama to attack the woman who had been its host for decades. Those massive chakra claws pierced straight through Kushina's heart while she was already weakened from giving birth. The agony wasn't just physical. Imagine being killed by the creature you'd shared your life with, feeling its power tear through your chest while knowing it had no choice in the matter. But Kushina's real torture was emotional. She stayed conscious long enough to see her newborn son Naruto, knowing she was about to leave him orphaned in a world that would hate him for carrying the same beast that killed her. The weight of that realization, that her death would condemn her child to a life of loneliness and persecution, was devastating. Her final words were a desperate attempt to give Naruto something to hold on to, telling him how much she loved him and how proud she was, even though she knew he wouldn't remember. She died trying to protect him from the psychological damage of growing up alone, but there was nothing she could do to prevent it. The Nine-Tails claws didn't just end Kushina's life. They created the orphan who would spend years searching for acknowledgement, the Jinchuriki, who would be feared and hated, and the cycle of pain that Obito used to justify his plan for infinite dreams. Her death became the foundation for everything that followed. Kushina's death created an orphan, but this next death created a legend's end. We've seen villains embrace death and heroes tragically fail. But what happens when a legend faces 6 versions of his own failure? The final death on this list was an act of torture that spanned time and friendship itself. This wasn't just murder. It was the systematic destruction of everything a teacher represents. Jiraiya's death against pain wasn't just the end of a legendary Sannin. It was a masterclass in how to destroy someone both physically and emotionally before finally letting them die. The pervy sage's final battle became a symphony of brutal torture that lasted far longer than any hero should have to endure. The fight started badly when Jiraiya realized he was facing 6 different bodies of pain, each with devastating abilities. But the real nightmare began when Pain's Asura Path grabbed his left arm and literally ripped it off mid-battle. Not cut, not sliced, torn away with mechanical force that shredded muscle and shattered bone. Fighting with one arm while bleeding out would have ended most shinobi, but Jiraiya kept going. Then Pain's animal path summoned a giant dog that bit down on his throat, crushing his windpipe and making it nearly impossible to breathe or speak. Every word became agony, every breath a struggle against his own damaged body. The black rods came next. These chakra-disrupting weapons pierced through his torso from multiple angles, not just causing physical pain, but completely screwing up his ability to use jutsu. Imagine having metal spikes driven through your body while feeling your chakra network get scrambled and disrupted. But the psychological torture was even worse than the physical damage. Jiraiya gradually realized he was fighting Nagato, one of the orphans he'd trained and loved like a son. The betrayal of having his former student trying to kill him added emotional devastation to the already overwhelming physical trauma. Despite everything, the severed arm, crushed throat, impaled body, and broken heart, Jiraiya forced himself to stay conscious for one final act. He carved a coded message about Pain's true identity into Fukasaku's back, using the last of his strength to give Hidden Leaf Village the intelligence they'd need to survive. Then came the drowning. Pain sent him sinking into the ocean depths while he was still alive, still bleeding, still struggling to breathe through his damaged throat. The legendary Toad Sage died slowly, feeling the water fill his lungs while his body shut down from blood loss and trauma. His death saved Hidden Leaf Village by providing the crucial information Naruto needed to defeat Pain. But the cost was watching one of the series' most beloved characters get systematically destroyed by someone he'd once considered family. The irony was crushing. The teacher died to stop his student's path of pain. Even legends fall, but nothing prepared us for this ultimate sacrifice. Kisame Hoshigaki's final act wasn't just suicide. It was the most disturbing display of loyalty ever put on screen. The monster of the hidden mist chose to be systematically devoured alive rather than betray the Akatsuki, and every second of it was pure nightmare fuel. After getting caught hiding inside Samahata and beaten down by Might Guy's 7th gate, Kisame was captured and about to be interrogated. Aoba was already digging into his mind to extract Akatsuki's secrets when Kisame bit down on his own tongue, hard enough to shock himself back to consciousness. That's when he made his choice. Kisame trapped himself inside a massive water dome, making sure nobody could interfere with what came next. Then, he summoned 3 massive sharks and let them do what sharks do best. But this wasn't a quick death. These weren't normal sharks going for a kill bite to the throat or head. They methodically tore him apart piece by piece, while he remained fully conscious and aware. Razor-sharp teeth ripped through his flesh in calculated bites, each one designed to cause maximum pain without ending his life too quickly. The water around him turned deep red as chunks of muscle and bone got torn away. One shark would clamp down on his arm while another went for his torso, and the third attacked his legs. Every bite sent waves of agony through his body, but Kisame never screamed or begged for it to stop. What made this death so disturbing was the symbolism. The shark-like ninja who had terrorized enemies with his predatory nature was being consumed by actual predators. It was poetic justice turned into visceral horror, with Kisame choosing to become prey rather than break his code. The psychological aspect was just as brutal as the physical torture. Kisame had a moment of reflection right before the feeding frenzy began, remembering his first meeting with Itachi and the path that led him here. He accepted his fate with complete calm, knowing that his loyalty meant more than his life. Naruto, Guy, and the others could only watch in horror as the clear water became a churning mass of blood and torn flesh. The dome violently splattered shark remains and human tissue everywhere, marking the end of one of the Akatsuki's most dangerous members. This death represents the ultimate fusion of physical and emotional agony. Kisame endured unimaginable pain to protect his beliefs, turning his own execution into a statement about the true meaning of loyalty. No other character in the series chose such a horrific death with such unwavering resolve. Conclusion: the true cost of the ninja world. These deaths show us what the ninja world really demands from its people. It's not just about cool jutsu or epic battles. It's about the willingness to endure unimaginable suffering for your beliefs, your village, or the people you love. Every single death we covered changed the story in fundamental ways. Kisame's loyalty inspired others. Jiraiya's sacrifice gave Naruto the knowledge to save Hidden Leaf Village. Kushina's death created the hero who would eventually bring peace. Even the brutal executions like Kaiza's death shaped the next generation's understanding of courage and sacrifice. The ninja world doesn't offer clean deaths or easy endings. It demands everything you have and then asks for more. These characters faced that reality and chose their path anyway, knowing the cost might be everything they held dear. If you want more deep dives into anime's most devastating moments, make sure to subscribe and check out our other breakdowns of the series' darkest secrets.